I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we're talking about education, faith, and family values. Parents that want a faith-based education for their children face challenges. Pastor Chassidi Martin has led a movement from homeschooling to classroom education, which focuses on faith. Now we're in Waterloo, Iowa, and we're talking about the challenge of children, family, faith, and education. Chassidi, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here today.
Hi, Peter. First of all, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here on your show. And like you mentioned, I'm Chassidi Martin, and I'm the co-founder, co-executive director of Royal Legacy Christian Academy here in Waterloo. And our mission here is to create a safe, friendly, Christ-centered environment where students can flourish academically and grow spiritually. So that's why we're here.
You know, people end up on the show not by chance. It's eventually we hear from different people in the community pointing out someone, hey, you should have this person on your show. They have a great message. Tell us a little bit about how you got started. I mean, you can start, I was born and I don't care. How did you get started on this? How did you get to where you are today? Over the years, how did things progress?
Sure. Well, it's interesting, Peter. Before I was married, before we had any children, the Lord had put on my heart that to homeschool at some point, whenever I did have a family. And I always had that in my heart. And when I did get married and we started having children, and I was involved in some ministry training through the Vineyard Church, I met my good friend Kendall Helmer, and she and I became fast friends through a ministry program called Vineyard Leadership Institute, and it's where I received some of my pastoral credentials through the Vineyard Church. And in this time I was actually expecting my first child during that time, and she didn't have any children at that time. But as we started having kids around the same age, same timeline, and my oldest child got to the age of where she was going to be going to kindergarten, we really thought, man, well, how are we really going to do the homeschooling thing? Or, but there was just some things about school, that I really appreciated as a kid. And when it really got down to it, I wasn't sure that I didn't want my child to have some of those experiences, those social interactions with other peers in the school setting. And so our families connected and decided that we would homeschool our children together. And we started doing that in our, sorry about that. We started doing that in our school. Sorry, phone. Started doing that at our church, in our Sunday school classrooms. And that was an awesome start. We had my children, we had 3 children at the time. My friend Kendall also had 2 children, and we came together. She would teach in Spanish one week because she is a licensed Spanish teacher. And then I would teach the following week in English. And we just met 3 days out of the week, and we had a great model going to the point where some parents would pop in and say, can I bring my kid? This is really great what you guys have going on. And we would say, well, it's not really what we're set up to do, but maybe you can drop in, and we really started to think about what would it be like? Could we actually start a school, and just not even thinking that we actually would do it. But the more we got going that school year, we really did think about it. And fast forwarding, Kendall's mother actually found a brochure or something about a Christian school in Des Moines, Joshua Christian Academy. And we were very impressed with their particular model of Christian education. Number one, they offered their tuition on a sliding scale. So 90% of their operating costs was covered through donations and sponsors, and only 10% through tuition. And that was intriguing to us. So we actually were able to go to Des Moines, take a tour of Joshua Christian Academy. The founders there were so accommodating. We sat for about an hour and a half, just asking questions, talking, and excited about doing it in our space in Waterloo as well.
So you felt this need in Waterloo community. There wasn't a school like yours there.
That's right. As we were considering how to educate our kids, there were some components that were very important to us that we didn't see in the landscape of educational options in the Cedar Valley. One of them being from the faith component, that was very important to us. And so there were some really nice Christian schools, and there are Christian schools that we even partner with and have a great relationship with here. However, there was a cultural diversity piece that was really important to us. It was important to me and my family, being an African-American family in Iowa, that our children's culture and expression was celebrated and embraced, and not just maybe a side note, or just that they'd have to assimilate into whatever was happening. So that was important. And my co-founder's thing was really the Spanish immersion piece. So that was a big deal. And we are now the premier and only Spanish immersion program in the Cedar Valley. So those components were important, and that's what we wanted to see in our school.
You know, that's a great point. And I really want to talk about that diversity and the immersion piece. We're going to take a short break. We come back, we'll continue our conversation with Pastor Chassidi Martin. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzzed and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
While a lot is changing in our world, at MediaCom, our focus remains the same, making sure you have the fastest, most reliable connection possible. During this critical time, we know your needs are changing. You may be working or learning from home, relying on telemedicine, or finding new ways to keep everyone entertained. If you need more speed, call or go online, and MediaCom will double your speed immediately for as low as $10 more a month for 1 year.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're talking about children, families, faith, and education. Chassidi, you ended the last segment on a wonderful comment, the idea of diversity and inclusion, and two historically underserved communities, the Black community and the Hispanic community. Talk about how your sort of organization and your mission is focused on providing for these families in need.
Well, you know what, Peter, I'd say that all families in the Cedar Valley are in need of something. And we serve families that are we serve a wide range of families in different socioeconomic statuses and cultural experiences. And so our understanding and one of our core beliefs is that the kingdom of God is a beautiful mosaic of cultural expression, and each one of them is important. And the more we have, the better it reflects God's kingdom. And so we're intentional about reaching and including people from multiple cultural backgrounds and experiences. So that right away became a very key component and became one of our core beliefs at Royal Legacy.
Yeah, I did notice that when you talked about starting us out before you had the formal school, we'll talk about how that got started, but you said that there was 1 week in Spanish and then you did a week. Now, were your kids Spanish speakers, or were they just immersed in learning to deal with Spanish?
Yes, sir. No, they were not Spanish speakers. They started just getting exposure. And that first time when we were homeschooling our own children, that was really just some exposure to a different language. And it was fun to just try to watch them in their young minds try to understand what was being said and then apply it. And also being able to empathize with many of the immigrant community members that come to our community without any English and have to just be immersed into language learning in school. And so that was our first kind of language learning experience with our students and being our own children. So when we started the school, we became an immersion school. So now all of our children, kindergarten through second grade, are taught exclusively in their target language, which is Spanish. All of their academic content is called the Early Total One-Way Method. And we are currently the only school in the Cedar Valley that's practicing this method. And research shows that it is the most effective way to learn a second language. And so my husband and I have 4 daughters, and my oldest 2 daughters are currently, operating in some pretty great fluency in Spanish, not only speaking it, but understanding and writing as well, and reading in Spanish. So
That's fascinating because actually, I know very few people know this, but English was not my first language. I was a son of immigrants, and we spoke a different language at home. And so when I got to kindergarten, I was, there was an ethnicity, there was a melting pot in Chicago where I grew up, but English was a foreign language to me.
wow.
And so I had to learn it. And so you can relate because it also made us all eminently more understanding of other cultures by the very nature of having to learn the culture here, which for a child is easy, I would suspect, as long as it was nurtured. So it's a fascinating exercise. Now, talk about going from idea and concept to actually opening the doors of a school.
Yeah, it's really funny talking about it in that way. This is our 4th school year now. And as I reflect back, and sometimes we're just so in the midst of doing school and life that we forget, like, man, we actually opened up a school, and so, but, when we got the idea, we really said, okay, yes, we're going to do this. We took 1 full year and gathered some great minds together, and which became our prayer and planning committee. So we prayed intentionally every single week, and we planned for an entire year. And that happened, every Thursday we would meet at La Cosecha Vineyard Church, which was Kendall's church. And we had about 6 of us together from different backgrounds and doing it. We got to the point where it was time to open. We opened our doors at Harvest Vineyard Church in the Sunday school rooms with our first 28 students. And it was kindergarten through 6th grade. And 2018-2019 school year, that was where we started. Yeah.
Wow, that's just really fascinating. And I'm sure that there are a lot of great stories, considering you also had to weather the COVID storm that popped up. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the stories that evolve as you're doing this sort of community-based education and building this capacity for bringing families together at faith-based education. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here. Wait. What? I can't drive. Why? I'm high. Oh.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening, our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Pastor Chassidi Martin about the importance of healing and opportunity in a world that often pits education and religion against each other. Mm-hmm. Chassidi, let's talk about that, because I'm sure a lot of parents sit at home thinking about their kids' future and education and try and figure out, how do I balance these two things?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I don't have an education background. I went to school, I graduated from college, but I'm not an education major or anything like that. So it's not necessarily my world. And I think that has served me well in being a co-founder of a school, because I'm approaching it as a parent and what I desire for my own children. And for us, what was important is that our kids knew that God is not something that you have to isolate for church, but instead, God is the author and finisher of our faith. He is in the center of math. He's a God of order. Everything that science can observe, God created. His fingerprint is on all of creation, anything that you could experience in life. History, God is in history, all of those things. So we wanted our children to know that they have a seamless relationship with God in all of the facets of life. And so that is a central part of our founding of Royal Legacy, is that it's even in school, every single day at Royal Legacy, we start our day in chapel. So we open our day with prayer. We open our day with a Bible lesson that's age appropriate, and we sing worship songs, and we talk about how God can help you with your math test you have coming up. And it's not just isolated for that hour at the start of the day, but in their classrooms as well. Our upper elementary teacher, Ms. Cahill, has a thing called Let's Drop and Give Me 30. And that means if someone's having a tough time, everybody stop, take a knee, we're gonna pray. So we're gonna pray for Sally, she's having a tough time, or whatever. So we just have, our desire was to create this environment. And that's what you hear in our mission statement, is we just had a revelation that if we have an environment where Christ is invited, then that will be a space where people, students especially, can foster their own personal relationship with God and invite him into the challenges they experience in a school setting sometimes.
I have a question for you, and I'm not asking for a scientific answer because I don't know if anybody has the answer, but a lot of parents have shared with me that they feel that faith-based education is one way to counter what they see as the growing mental health issues that children are facing, that in a godless world, they don't have a place to turn to feel inspired, to feel hope. And we don't really live in a culture, when you watch television or social media, inspiration and hope are not the primary messages that in a world our kids are living in. How powerful is that a motivation to do what you're doing, and for the parents that bring their children to your school?
Peter, I would say it's one of the main motivators, because number one, it's important to say that nothing can replace God's intention for the family unit. Mom, dad at home with children and being taught in the ways of God. That is the number one most important thing you can bless your children with. Unfortunately, we live in a fallen world, and that is not. In fact, the family is under the most attack that it probably has ever been. And because of that, God is raising up different things to fill in those gaps. And we believe Royal Legacy is one of those things. Our mission is evangelistic. Not all of our families are believers in Christ. Not all of our families are in church. If they do have a belief in Christ, it's maybe just kind of a nice ornament, not necessarily what they hang their hat on, so to speak. And so this is a sanctuary for many of our children. I remember I'm a public school kid. I went to going to public school. And so when I said I wanted to start a school, a lot of my family members were like, why are you doing that? You don't want to shelter your kids. You want to give them real life experiences where they have to figure stuff out. You don't want to have just this nice, cushy place where they go to school every day. And the reality is, nowadays, most of our kids need a cushy place to go, so where they can actually feel safe and feel loved and feel nurtured, and maybe they have some gaps here or there in their life. So yes, that's very important to us.
So even a parent that may not be the most strict in terms of observation of faith, may not even be going to church, they feel their kids get a safe place to go in a faith-based school?
Yes, absolutely. They see us as part of their village, and we're grateful for that. We're grateful. We consider that to be a privilege and an honor that we do not take lightly, that parents have invited us into their children's lives. They've they've given an opportunity to make a choice in how they want to educate their children. And we're very grateful that they've chosen Royal Legacy.
That's just a great message. And we're going to take a short break and invite Chassidi back to share some final comments and insights and advice for you, things that might help you make a decision about raising your kids. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At MediaCom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared. And you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
Whether it's advice on managing your anxiety or tools to help you stay grounded, Coping-19 provides a range of resources and self-care tips to help you cope with this pandemic. We can help. Find the resources that work best for you at coping-19.org.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and today on Surviving Dad, we're talking about education, faith, and family values with the co-founder of Royal Legacy Christian Academy in Waterloo, Iowa. Let's see what advice Pastor Chassidi Martin has to share with us. Chassidi, this is your forum. Talk to us. Why should parents think about the kind of experience you offer at your school, even if they live somewhere else? What are some of the questions they need to ask themselves?
It's interesting because I've been asked this several times. Why did you start a school? Why start a school? There's already schools. There's already Christians. Why start a school? And, for me, again, as a parent, I saw a gap that I wanted my kids to experience, and there wasn't something that I wanted to offer my kids. And so that's the most important thing. But what's important to me may not be important to someone else. So what we decided was we want to give our children an option. And right now there's a lack of options in the Cedar Valley. Truth be told, there are families that have started with us and said, I want my kids to have a different experience. And we say, God bless you as you go. Thank you for considering us. And so really where we come in is empowerment. We want to offer some empowerment for our families, our parents, to make the choice that's best suited for their kids. Can God move in your life if you're in a public school setting? Absolutely. But do I want you to be in a public school if it's not the best fit for your child? No, I do not. So that is why we started our school, more so because there was an option we wanted to offer the Cedar Valley for parents who wanted to choose something different than what was currently available.
We hear from people that the growth of faith-based education is really because they took the little bit of faith that was allowed in public schools out. What do you have people that start in a public school system and then move over because they're concerned with issues like that?
You know what? I have a different, maybe less popular opinion about that, Peter. Okay. I don't think faith has ever been in the schools. I think that one thing that we wanted for Royal Legacy was to create an environment where an authentic relationship can be fostered with God. And even if you pray over the intercom or whatever, that's not necessarily going to foster or encourage a personal relationship. So that really starts at home. It starts in the heart with real one-on-one relationships. And that's what we try to create here. And so you can't take faith out of the schools because you can't take people out of the schools, and there's people are the ones who God has a relationship with. And that's kind of my take on it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that was my thought on what you said.
No, it's more a dialogue than a question. So that was a good point. Sure. And yeah. How do you see the results academically for the kids? How are they measuring up?
Yeah, when we do see quite a difference when a student comes in from a much larger setting where there may be 30, 40 kids in the classroom to where now they only have 12 kids in the classroom and get a lot more one-on-one attention. There's always some scaffolding to get them caught up to where their peers that have been in our space for a year or even a semester. So yes, you do see a lot more streamlined, focused, intentional learning happening in a space that's smaller with more individualized attention. Absolutely.
Is that making kids happier? I mean, do you see a general, like, their increase in happiness through that process, or does it make them a little nervous?
You know, in my experience with our kids here, there's a lot of joy here. There's a lot of friendship happening. And there's also more opportunity for conflict resolution because you only have the 12 kids in your class. You can't just forget that one and go somewhere else, you know? So we've kind of become a family unit in that way. So it's really great. And if I could say one thing, you asked me, Peter, earlier about what advice I might give parents. One thing that I tell our parents here, I cannot express enough how important it is to guard your children's eyes and ears. You know, there are so many messages and so many different opportunities for the world to get their hooks in our kids. And beyond what many would say is sheltering, you know, we had a conversation with a parent recently that was taking their kid to a concert to one of their favorite music artists that was not really appropriate for their age. And we had a conversation about it. She invited me and asked me what I thought. And, you know, her point was, I don't want to shelter my kids so much. I want them to be exposed. And I always say there's a big difference between exposure and living a lifestyle that, you know, becomes a pattern of how you do things. So if I could leave any advice with parents that are trying to educate their kids, it starts at home. And monitoring what they see and hear and intentionally placing positive Christ-centered messages at home is a great big part of their education.
Wow. Thank you so very much for sharing all your ideas with us today. And thank you all for joining us. Check out our website at healthyiowa.org and keep your eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.